Well, hey, Dave Melinda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. I usually start with a question, but today I'm going to start with a definition because it's a kind of a cool word that we don't hear a lot. And the word is actually apex. And the definition, the way my guest today has it, is the highest level an organization can or wants to achieve. And so I thought that was really cool. So I'm like, I got to get this guy on. And then I find out I know the guy, so that's even better. So I'm honored to be hanging out with Rick Bowers. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for hanging out with us. You're the founder and CEO of APEX GTS Advisors. So tell us, what is going on at APEX GTS Advisors these days?
Well, I'm still in that first year of the business. It's been exciting to kind of build it and be a little bit out with the marketplace and getting some exciting new clients and doing a lot of fun stuff.
That's so cool. So GTS, I like two of your three. I'm going to start out right away. I like two of your three words. I
Okay.
like the grow. G is, I love that. And I love the success. This whole transform thing, I got to say, there's a bunch of people listening right now, entrepreneurs and business owners that are like, yeah, I'm kind of on Dave's side on this one.
Okay.
I wrote down like pain, uncomfortable, commitment, challenge. I write these words down and I'm like, man, can we get by without the T? So I wanted to start there. Can we get by without the T, or is that one of these mandatory things here?
I think it's a mandatory thing. I've always kind of where the name came from. I've always kind of been a car guy, and GTS in a car terms is Grand
There you
Touring
go.
Sport. But from a
Cool.
consulting standpoint, I came up with those three words. Um, and I think transform is important because it doesn't mean that you have to completely change your organization. It's you could even just transform your attitude about X or
Okay.
transform person A to be more successful by just teaching them communication skills, teaching them to just understand themselves, whether it's from an emotional intelligence standpoint or from a DISC standpoint, from a driving forces. I mean, all of these different things, that's really something that's transformational for an individual.
Sure.
And like even some of my clients, I have a couple commercial construction clients, and these guys that I'm working with building 20, 30-story buildings, but they know all the details of the building, but they don't know how to talk to their trade partners. And
Sure.
they get frustrated with the trade partner, or the trade partner gets frustrated with them. So if I can transform that situation, they're going to grow and they're going to be successful.
Wow. Well, I tell you, I already like you when you call them trade partners rather than subcontractors, because subcontractors are considered subhuman, subpar. So thank
Yes.
you. The world of trade contractors thanks you for that clarification.
Yeah.
But I wonder about like the transformation piece. I mean, I was thinking as you were talking, Rick, I was thinking like, are they small course corrections? Can they be small? Or like you said, they don't necessarily have to be these huge dramatic shifts. And I think that's what we as entrepreneurs and business owners kind of get uncomfortable with. So I'm assuming there's some of both that can go on in a company like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the small things that add up to the success in the end of the day, and so that's really what we're trying to accomplish. And I talk on another T word is transparency. Another T word is trust. And so I'm really trying to create the communication and the transparency so the trust can kind of float to the surface. Because without those words, you're never going to have that trust. You have to eliminate those fearful situations. You got to create that safe space for people to communicate. And that's sometimes huge, sometimes a little smaller. It just depends on the organization.
Well, I tell you, that's a big thing right there is trust. I remember reading Patrick Lencioni's book, The Five Dysfunctions of a Team, and trust was like the number one thing. And the
Yeah.
more that I'm involved with clients, and I'm sure you see the same thing, is that without trust, I mean, where do you go? You can't start. You really can't go anywhere. So, your highest level, your apex piece, that obviously is the trust has got to be paramount in that. So I appreciate that. That's pretty cool. um When you look at, I mean, as from a leadership perspective, are there qualities that you see that people, successful people that are really moving towards their apex, do you see any that stand out in what you've encountered over the years?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is maybe even more so over the last 3 years since the pandemic is organizations understanding that a key in this whole business world, and I don't care what business you're in, is relationships. And if
Sure.
you are focused on building that relationship, you're going to struggle to bring that business to your apex or to that level that you want to get it to. And so um that's something that happens again. I'm kind of back to the communication piece again, but the people that can understand the communication and understand who they are and who others are and then adapt their communication style for success, that's where they're going to build the best relationships, and as you build relationships, the business is going to follow.
Well, and it's interesting because, I met you at TTI, and we do a lot of stuff with disc and personalities. And the interesting thing there is that, some people naturally are totally cool in relationships. They're totally, their
Yeah.
personality is such where they naturally can carry on a conversation. I mean, in a large group of people in a networking situation, there are certain people that, freeze, panic, quite frankly, can't
Yeah.
even do it. Some people can't even do it. And then there's others that can naturally flow through a room. So, I mean, when you talk about relationships from a leadership perspective, Rick, if you're not good at that, if there's somebody listening that's not really, doesn't feel like they have that as a strength for themselves, are there some things that they can do to maybe get out of that box, get out of that comfort zone a little bit? I mean, what would you suggest for somebody listening in that case?
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing is really creating that self-awareness. So just understanding who they are naturally and being okay with that. If you talk back to the disc model and you go with someone that's in the C category and they're more precise than they are pioneering, they're going to tend to really focus on details and that kind of stuff, as a person in the I continuum where they're more outgoing and less reserved is going to be able to network and really work through the room, as you mentioned. But what I've found also is combining that with the emotional intelligence assessment and helping a person understand kind of what's going on, what they're feeling when they walk into that room and it's full of people and they've got to talk to 5 people. That's their goal for the night or whatever their process that they're trying to accomplish is. You get that emotions flowing through your body and you start to do the self-regulation, and then you move into that, okay, now I'm going to use my social awareness and I'm going to start reading the room. Do I see people that I can talk to that look friendly or look like they're doing some of the same types of activities that I am, and just kind of working through that process, but understanding just who you are and then being able to read the room is a key piece. And I think emotional intelligence is a big tool that helps you with that as well.
Sure. Well, and I think you stumbled on something that I want to make sure everybody's getting is it's okay to be who you are. I mean, part of the growth, part of the transformation, and part of your success piece is always trying to kind of change, right? But yet, it's kind of like oxymoron, right? Where we got to be okay with who we are, but we are okay changing. So I love telling people when we do disc work, I love saying you're perfect the way you're built, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but some people really have a hard time with that. So for somebody that's listening that might not be in agreement with us on the fact that they are okay how they are, what's your word? How do you encourage that person, or what do you share with that person when you run across them?
Um, it's just help them understand kind of the differences in people. So this is what you tend to do in a natural way. And let's say I'm talking to Bob and you're working with Sally, and Sally happens to be much more outgoing. And so how do you approach Sally versus how does Sally approach you when she comes to you and just starts going through a lot of small talk and this kind of stuff, and you're wishing she would get to the details? That's the same thing when you go to her and you just jump right to the details for no small talk. It's frustrating both directions. And so if you can just realize that you're different and you approach that conversation slightly different, you're going to have a much better result than if you were to just, again, jump right into details versus saying, oh, how was your weekend? Have you seen any good movies lately, or just something like that, to just kind of break the ice with someone that's very outgoing.
Yeah, I laugh when I think about that. I made a huge mistake once, Rick, of I spoke somewhere in the country to a room full of engineers, and I knew it going into it. And so, I'm thinking I'm thinking I got to make these guys laugh, at least make them smile, right? I mean, and that was like my whole goal in this 60-minute talk. And I tell you what, it bombed so bad. I mean, the content was good, but me trying to bring that personal twist to it, it didn't work. And this was, as I was learning about personalities and stuff. And so for somebody listening, that's, I think, a really good distinction. There are people that are people, I'm going to call them, for lack of better words. And then there are people that are like fact people.
Yeah.
And so, it's really hard to jump into business without breaking the ice, like you said, to the people. Just like if you ask the same question, to an engineer or somebody that's more fact-based, I don't want to, put everybody that's an engineer in that box. If you're more fact-based and you start asking that question, what'd you do this weekend? How's the family? There's like this really distinct line where you don't cross that line, right? I mean, how do you start to determine that distinguishing mark on people when you walk into a room or when you meet somebody for the first time? How do you tell where they are personality wise?
I think it's just kind of watching the mannerisms. When I'm doing a speaking event or training session or something too, I'll kind of know the room a little bit based on their reports and things. And one thing I like to do is find someone that's a high C and walk up to them and get in their personal space and watch them back up. And so it's just kind of the things that you can observe in terms of people. I think it's important to understand that. And even when you ask a question, how did they respond? Did they have more of a long paragraph, or are they responding in a bullet point? And so just some of those types of things. Do they look like they're more outgoing? Are they talking to other people in the room? Are they standing by themselves? And then you'll know a little bit too if you just kind of know what the crowd is walking in. Like you said,
Sure.
if you're speaking to engineers or accountants versus salespeople, or I did a session for a private school this year, and I mean, it was all I could do to keep them focused because everybody wanted to have a lot of talking conversations and things, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and you keep using this, a word that I kind of want to come back to, Rick, is awareness. I know that for myself, if I'm not super if that's not really in my mind, I kind of go into a situation and I just let it happen. And I forget some of the things that I've learned. I forget to be, cognizant and aware of the person that I'm communicating with. Or I forget to watch their mannerisms. Are they using their hands? Are they smiling a lot? Are they, are they attracting a crowd, so to speak? Does that take practice, I'm assuming, and that over time, people listening, the more they pay attention to it, the more aware they become? Is that a safe assumption?
Yeah, and it's really enlightening for people when you're like, you just go back to the engineers again, or in the construction industry, when I say, well, if you notice that I tend to talk with my hands a lot, and so there's a lot of action in there, and so you'll pick up on little things like that can help you with that process. And back to if you're struggling with a trade partner, if they're focused on a detail, then help them with that detail, and then kind of expand your conversation back from where they're at. And so, yeah, it's the awareness piece, whether it's self-awareness, awareness of others, is key.
And I mean, especially in that case, I mean, when there's a trade partner, trade contractor, and a general contractor, we'll call it. I mean, there's already kind of an unwritten hierarchy there where, some general contractors, sorry if you're listening, I've been in the contracting business most of my life, so I can say this. I mean, most general contractors have this I'm higher than you attitude. And so I come in as a trade into this kind of like down here. Well, when my high D kicks in, I'm like, screw that,
Yeah.
I mean, it's so, there's kind of this conflict that goes on. So do you see a lot of conflict with personalities, whether it's on a team, whether it's in a selling situation like that, if people aren't able to acclimate, do you see a lot of that?
It has a better chance of happening when you don't really understand the person that you're working with, because it's oh, that person's not being very picky, that's just who they are naturally, and they thrive on details, and they have a fear of making mistakes, so they're going to always focus on details. Or this person just wants to solve every problem, they're not trying to run me over, they just want to solve the problem and move on. So you kind of get those characteristics of the different behavioral styles. Or even if you go to the S, the high S, the steady, very steady person, it's like she's not trying to be that slow, that's just her natural process. Or she's very close knit with the information, um and kind of loyal to a fault sometimes with it. So there's all these characteristics that, once you start to understand the language, help you in the whole process. I was listening to a webinar yesterday, and they were talking about creating a culture in the organization, and sometimes it's bringing in that new language that makes a difference. And DISC is a great tool. It's a universal language that you can kind of apply to any organization, just like you can with EQ, in terms
Sure.
of, is my glass clear or cloudy,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So when you put that additional language on top of what you're already doing, it gives people something to kind of help them through the process.
Wow. What I tell you, I don't know about you, Rick, but I run into people that are like, Dave, build me a team that are just like me. I want all the people on the team to be just like me, right? The business owners, like, hey, if we could just have a team of fill in the blank of who the name is, right? Just a team of Bob's, the owner, man, this place would rock. And I'm like, man, I used to agree with that before I understood DISC. And now I'm like, that's like the kiss of death right there. So I mean, if somebody's listening, right now to us, and that's kind of their thought process deep down, they may not even want to admit it, but deep down, they're like, yeah, if my team was more like me, we'd be more successful. What would your comment or your response be to that person?
I would be careful building that team, just because you're going to get a whole bunch of people telling everybody else what to do, and nobody actually doing the work. And so it's one thing I use all the time is the group wheel from TTI. It
Sure.
just, you take the whole team and it plots it on the wheel for you, and you say, okay, I've got a whole bunch of supporters, a couple relators, a couple implementers here, but I've got no conductors, no persuaders on this side of the wheel. And so everybody's just kind of like over here waiting for someone to tell them what to do. Or
Yeah.
you have everybody over here trying to tell everybody what to do, and there's nobody over here to do it. And so it's critical to kind of see that. And it's amazing when you show it to a client for the first time or two with a team, and they say, okay, well, I can't build this next team without having that. So how do we make sure we get this with all the new people?
Yeah. I laugh, man. If there were 10 Daves on a team, the room would be loaded with post-it notes. We'd have so many ideas, right? But nothing would get implemented, and that's what I think is so powerful about this, is finding people. I mean, I can implement when I have to. But I don't lead with that, right? I'd much rather spend the morning brainstorming than a morning doing
Yeah.
whatever the work was. And I think it kind of goes back to what you said. You be okay with who you are. I
Yeah.
mean, I run into people on the assessments on occasion and they fight it. That's not me. That's not me. That's not me. And I'm like, you guys, these might be blind spots for you,
Yeah.
or you truly are resisting this. So do you run into people that often that are not open to this, or they're kind of, questioning it at every turn? Do you see that very often?
Usually there's one or two in a group, and if it's a group of 20 or 30 people, you may get more than one or two. But What I find is I typically start with an organization on a 3-hour session, and in the beginning of the session, those first couple pages, you can tell who those people are, and they're like kind of questioning it, and like during an exercise, they'll raise their hand and say, "I'm not really sure what this means," or "This doesn't seem to be me."
Yeah.
And the more I get the rest of the room talking and sharing and that kind of stuff, most of the time, those people by the end of the report, and the end of the 3 hours, they're sharing just as much, and then they've bought in, and they're like, "Yeah,
Right.
now that I think about it, that probably is me." And so
Yeah.
it's just kind of getting the interaction happening, and that's really what kind of gels everybody together.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've had it where people are like, dude, that is so you. And, and then they have to like, now they're at that spot where they either continue to dig in because maybe it's something they don't like about themselves. I'm not sure. I don't go into that much detail with somebody in a group setting when they really start kind of bucking that. But I was just curious,
Yeah.
and for people listening, again, I think it's so powerful to build a team, of different people. You grew up in Iowa, and so you were in the Big Ten, and so I'm from Wisconsin, Big Ten. So it's not football season, so you and I can talk. If it was football season, we probably wouldn't be having this discussion. But I think about it, and I think, man, if there were 11 quarterbacks on any team, I don't care who you have, you would not win one game. You wouldn't
Right.
even you wouldn't even score points. You would have total points scored on you because you have no defense. I mean, you'd have 11 quarterbacks out there that they can't take a hit if they have to. So I mean, I think that if we can help people rethink that strategy of, I just want more people like me, because I see that happening a lot. But you know, I think that as we switch like into employee engagement, because I know for myself what engagement looks like for somebody that's like me, outgoing and people person. I
Mhm.
struggle with somebody that's kind of more reserved. I start to wonder, are you really engaged? And that's a real trap that I found for myself. So when you think about employee engagement, are they visible in different personalities, I guess, is the way I want to ask that question.
I think as a leader in an organization, if you do a good job creating an environment where people can be successful, the term that I started using probably 5 years ago, and I didn't create the term, I learned it from someone else, and I don't remember who, but it's that employee experience. And so if you create a safe place for people to have conversations, and you create an employee experience where they have the resources that they need to do the job, they have the ability to communicate and ask questions, they have the ability to make a mistake, but as long as they learn from their mistake, it's something that we can work through, and those types of things. And when you put that kind of an environment in place, which really kind of adds to the existing culture within the organization, people, no matter what their behavioral style are, will kind of, you'll see it. You'll see the interaction. You'll see the
Sure.
working stuff. But even though certain behavioral styles are going to really still be focused on details, and certain are going to be like working the phones and talking to others, and there's the people that are really driving the business, and the ones that are doing the work. And so you have all the different styles, and it's about the leader. And if the leader understands what each person brings, then
Yeah.
that leader can kind of make everybody rise to the top. And that's what makes it happen. And I think, going back to your football analogy, is not so much at the pro level, but college and high school level. Those teams that win the national championship, or the teams that win the state title, don't always have the superstar quarterback or the running back or the linebacker, but they've got a group of kids that all come together and do their job,
Right.
and they all just trust everybody next to them that this is going to happen, and they can move the ball down the field and score. And so it's really about just understanding what you're supposed to do, being able to buy into the vision of the organization, and then everybody can be successful no matter what style.
Yeah. Well, and I think back to my 8th grade minimal football experience in my life. I lasted 1 year. And I was thinking about it. I in the sense that I was on the line, on the offensive line, but I wasn't good at it because I couldn't ever. I always stood there and waited for like the defense to hit me, and it was like I was protecting the quarterback, and rather than pushing out, I was always just waiting, and I always got knocked over, ran the wrong way, whatever it was. So it was a short-lived career. But it was like if I would have wanted to experience more, I would have had to find a different spot in my organization, so to speak, right, on my team. And I think that that's the fear, I think, of that I run into. People, it's kind of working, Rick. So I don't want to upset the apple cart. I
Yeah.
mean, is there some downside to repositioning or redoing, learning more about this disc piece for people? Are there downsides that there are times it doesn't make sense, or is this always a positive in your mind?
I think if whoever's doing the facilitation of the process is doing a good job, I don't see that there's a downside to it.
Okay.
It's really just back to that word that we talked about in the beginning, back to creating that self-awareness and awareness of others. And once you have that, then you can adapt for the current situation to be more successful. And so if you have someone that's struggling with it, then take that person aside, not like pull them out of a session, but like at another private time, and just have an individual conversation just to see what's going on with a specific individual. Or what I tend to do is, as a consultant coming into an organization, if I'm working with someone that's struggling, I'll say to the person, the company's paying me to help you. And so my goal right now is to do everything I can to get you better, because as you get better, the organization gets better. And then everybody on the team is also flowing and interacting better. And so
Sure.
this isn't something that you're being punished for. It's just something that they're actually spending money to take care of you and that kind of thing. And so it kind of helps the person understand that it's a positive thing, and it's something that they want to keep you, because if they didn't want to keep you, you'd already be gone.
Right.
I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and that's the thing that I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with is investing in their team.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but when you think about it from the professional sports perspective, what do you have if you don't have a team?
Yeah.
Or you have a mediocre team?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you don't see those mediocre teams in the playoffs in any sport. I mean, you never make the leaderboard in golf. I mean, you don't end up at that highest level that you can get to.
Yeah.
You talked about, the first part is being okay with yourself, learning more about yourself. I mean, the second part of DISC here is actually learning more about others. And you've kind of been hinting at that, and so that's, I think, where it gets a little bit more challenging, right? Because it's okay. I don't mind reading 30, 40, 50, 60 pages, depending on what assessment about myself. But it gets a little bit dicey now when I have to start thinking on my feet, because I'm guessing like I talk to you different than I talk to Ashley, right? I mean, personality wise, you have two different, husband and wife in the company. You guys have two different ways that you approach things. But if I try to communicate with you the same way as her, there may be some differences. Again, I'm just curious, is that hard? Do you see it get harder as people go? It goes from, hey, I know myself, now I got to know you. Ooh, that gets a little harder. Do you see some resistance at that spot there?
I like to use the do's and don'ts on communicating page.
Okay.
Or if it's in the short report, it's one page. If it's in the longer report, I think it's 2 pages. But picking 2 to 4 things that are really critical to you from the things you don't like in communication and the things that you do. And I always start with the don'ts. As
Okay.
in, I'll do that for the whole room. And this
Okay.
is something where I'll have everybody share. It's like, tell me the things that are most important to you from a don't standpoint. And once they get those out, then it's like, okay, now what are the do's?
Okay.
And so those, I think, are pieces that are really critical. And I think another really fun communication activity is to take the TTI wheel, and there's one that has words that work and words that don't work.
Okay,
and
sure.
go to the opposite side of the wheel and say, if I say this word to you, how do you feel? And they're like, ooh, I don't like that. So I say, how do you think the other person feels when you use it to them and they're on the opposite side of the wheel as you? And so those are just some simple things to do with the reports and with the group wheel that really will help them understand and how to communicate and pick up on the different people.
I love that white paper on words that don't work, you know, because and I try in my simple sixth grade education to tell people that it's a kind of a brain thing, you know. And for me, when somebody uses the word process, I get, you know, I think of spreadsheets, I think of like 42 steps to this process. My brain goes crazy. Some chemical gets emitted, and I'm just like, oh, this is, you know,
Yeah.
I lose interest like instantly, right? But if you
Yeah.
use the word path, for me, it doesn't have nearly the same negativity because we have some woods behind our house and there's some paths that we have through there. And I immediately go to something that's positive.
Okay.
So, you know, back to your communication piece. I mean, I know for you what words would work and what would, or for myself, I should say, what would work and what wouldn't. How do I start to understand what words do work for you and what words don't work for you?
I like to work with teams in a group setting and just kind of go around the room and have, like, I'll pull a pie quadrant and I'll just read the words there, and I'll like, all right, raise your hand if those feel good to you, and raise your hand if those are making you frustrated, and just kind of bounce back and forth on the team
Gotcha.
from that standpoint. Or if I'm having to coach two people that are struggling to interact with each other, then I'll kind of take that and I'll expand those words using a thesaurus, and then kind of dig in and just add words to it and say, here's the things that you're doing. And if I'm the sales guy that has to deal with an engineer on a certain process, and then you keep saying to the engineer, in my opinion, and this and that and the other thing, the guy's going to shut down and said, I don't
Yep.
care about your opinion, give me the facts.
Right. Yep. Well, and same goes for expecting an immediate answer. I mean, there are people that need time to process the
Yes.
information. They're not lower in EQ, they're not lower in IQ, nothing's wrong with them. They just need to process information. So me, results Dave, is standing there, you know, kind of tapping my foot, expecting an answer when they need time to process that information. And when I learned that, Rick, oh my gosh, it just changed the way the expectations that I had in communication. Because again, I come into a situation and I'm expecting immediate answers.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and even on fill in the blanks, I mean, A, B, and C kind of answers are a little bit easier. Give me multiple choice, I can give you an answer quicker, right? But man, you tell a high, you know, C person to fill in a blank, and then you just stand there and wait for them. You're going to be
Yeah.
waiting a long time, and they
And
do, like you said, they get frustrated.
and I'll even give the person permission to say, okay, well, I need a little bit of time to internalize this, grab a few facts, and really give you the right answer. I don't want to just give you an
Yeah,
answer that pops into my head because it might not be right. And so by just instead of just standing there doing nothing or getting flustered, say, okay, I understand what you're asking for. Can you give me, is it 5 minutes? Is it 10 minutes or an hour? Whatever it is you need, ask
yeah,
permission to get back to that person in a certain amount of time. It's if I say the same thing as, like, if someone gives you a directive to do something and you're like, okay, but like maybe the directive was paint the wall. It's
yeah,
like, well, which wall do you want me to paint? What color do you want me to paint it? But
yeah.
if you just say, okay, when they say paint the wall, then it's as much your fault for not asking questions as it is the other person for saying paint the wall.
Yeah, and for me, all I did was I'm super happy because I took paint the wall I checked it off my
Yes.
list. It's done,
Yes.
right? It's
Yes.
now on to you, and I'm thinking, hey, and I think no news is good news. So I'm like, hey, they didn't say anything, so they
Mhm.
must know what wall, they must know what color, you know. So
So by
that,
understanding just the differences between the four different types of people, to take it as simple as possible as you can with the disc model,
yeah,
and saying, make sure that this type of person understands what you want before you walk away. And if you're this person, make sure you have all the information you need before you let them walk away. And if they do
yep,
walk away, send them an email. But it's just
exactly,
little things that you can give a team and team
yep.
members that is going to allow them to be successful. It goes back to the makes a transformation in terms of what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah. And I try to help people think about it, the fact that certain people learn by seeing, certain people learn by hearing, and certain people learn by doing. And so, when you have an auditory that just is able to bark out things, and the expectation is that I'm going to remember, those 10 numbers that you gave me, if I don't write them down, I'm no way in the world going to remember that. So, I think you know, um, visual and auditory and kinesthetic, the VAK really comes into play here. And have you seen any kind of correlation between any certain style and disc matches up with visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, or is that all across the board? Have you seen anything there?
If I remember right, I think that's kind of across the board.
Okay.
I don't know if TTI has done any more research on that. I don't think there was anything like real concrete back when I
Yeah.
was still there,
Gotcha.
from that standpoint.
Yeah. The last one then, so the first one was, again, know yourself more. Again, the second is to really now learn about other people. And a lot of people stop right there. And I really encourage people at that point to say, hey, work on ways to acclimate your way to their way. I like that country song, I'll start walking your way, you start walking mine, we meet in the middle. That to me is like the ultimate in communication.
Yeah.
And so when somebody's at that level where they start to actually modify their communication, or they modify their behavior to align with the person that they're talking to, that's where I think real communication and real things happen. Is that what the apex really looks like for a team in your mind when they start getting to that level?
Yeah, absolutely. And I usually, when you're first starting to understand how to adapt, it's like if you're the high C going to talk to a high I, because those are kind of opposites, it's you need to not start with details, you need to start with small talk, and vice versa. Or if you're a high D going to talk to a high S, you need to slow down, talk in a softer voice, and make sure they don't have any questions when you're done with your comments, and vice versa. If you're a high S going to talk to a high D, you need to be a little bit more assertive, think of things in terms of bullet points, and try to do your questions or your comments in that kind of a fashion, because of the pace difference between the two of you. And so there's just little things that you start with that, and then as they go back and forth, it's kind of whoever approaches the other person, you adapt first, and then the other person will come back. And so there's just little steps that I think work well for people that are new to this.
That's awesome. So if somebody did listen to us and they did fast forward the tape, and now they have this team of 10, we're going to use 10 just because it's easy math.
Okay.
They have 10 people on their team, and kind of each quadrant has people in it. So they did a well-rounded team. How does the leader, if he or she is in a group setting, how do you then touch all four of those personalities? I mean, is that like, how does that work in your mind?
Um, I think it's you have to kind of present in your natural way to start.
Okay.
So if the leader's a high D, you're going to have that natural sense of how you put things out there in bullet points, and kind of that very direct going forward. But as there's questions or as there's interactions within the team, make sure that you're adapting from that standpoint, and you need to be as clear as you can, so that the vision is bought into. And when the team buys into what the leader is selling, so to speak, or the vision that they're putting out there, everybody's going to kind of gravitate towards that. And so it's really about being clear in the communication process from the beginning, and you don't have to completely be somebody that you're different, or you can't be in the front of the group talking to four different types of people. That's just not, it's not a thing. So you have to kind of just understand that what your group is, and a lot of times, even when I was at TTI, and I had a lot of people on the S side that work for me, and so I tended to have to slow down a little bit, and be okay with the pace of the way projects were getting done, and sometimes that was easier to do than others. And so That's where you see the adaption. And even when you look at the graph one versus graph two, and how there's adapting things going on, it's just teaching the group that it's okay to adapt,
Yeah.
but you're going to get into those stressful situations where your natural style is going to just come out.
Yeah.
And so being aware of that, and that perceptions page comes into play too. And if you utilize that, it's a little bit tricky sometimes with groups because the words on that page are harsh, but it helps people understand how they're being perceived by different styles as well.
Well, and I think that's a great word as we start to land the plane today. I think that's a great word, adaptation. I mean, again, a lot of people came into the business world, or they own their own business, so no one can tell them what to do, right? They can do it their way. I'm in charge. Not that that's right or wrong. It just, now we're kind of presenting this different side of this where it's like, I guess I have to really, you want me to adapt? You want me to slow down, speed up? Whatever the adaptation looks like. And I think that's the difference between, average companies and companies that can reach that apex like you were talking about. So any words of encouragement to that person that might be resisting that last little piece?
Yeah, I typically use a slide that I title "What's in it for me?" And then on that slide, I talk about hard skills and soft skills. And then I cross off soft skills. And I said, I don't like soft skills because they're harder than hard skills. They're people skills.
Yeah.
And then kind of just talk about what's going on there. And that hard skills are something that you've been doing for years and they just come naturally to you and
Right.
practice, and it's gotten good. Soft skills or people skills are the things that aren't natural for a lot of us. And the more you kind of understand that is going to allow your relationships to grow. And as your relationships grow, then your hard skills are going to actually be more effective. Because if your people skills are out of whack, your hard skills are going to be less effective. And so I'm working hard no matter what. So if I can get more results from it because I just do these simple things, maybe not so simple, but so these things to practice from a people standpoint, I'm more effective and I'm getting more done. I'm going to make the company's going to be more successful depending on where you're at in the organization.
Yeah. And it's, man, I tell you, the team is living and moving and breathing. So I wish it would just stay as it was. Like today it's different than it's going to be tomorrow. I mean, there's just a lot going on. And so I think we invest time, your group, our group, we invest time with leaders to help them really understand that there are human beings on your team.
Yeah.
I just happened to read an article today that somewhere in Texas is the first non-employee McDonald's. And so you can drive through or eat in, and there isn't one person on site. And I'm like, man, I get it. I get it. But I'm like, man, what do I do if my fries aren't right? I mean, what do you do? I mean, I just, so there's all these things that I guess some people are super excited as they're hearing that, going, man, what a great idea. I had one client that said, man, if I didn't have a customer and I didn't have a team, that should be a great place to work, and it's just because you have all these people in there. So
yeah, if it wasn't for the employees and the customers, this job would be easy.
Yep, exactly. Exactly. So, two questions. I'm gonna let you go, Rick. What would be a tip of the day that you would have for somebody listening? Maybe it's something we covered, maybe it's something that's just burning on your heart right now, but what would be a tip of the day for an entrepreneur business owner that's listening right now?
It was a big part of a coaching conversation this week that I had, and I think it kind of is appropriate here. I didn't really get it into any of the other conversations, but write a sticky note on your desk or on your computer or somewhere that says "work with, don't do for." So many leaders just do for the employee. So like if there's a problem, they just go and they fix it instead of working with. So work with, not do for. And I think it's just a simple little tip that if you think of that, you'll just have to work with them once, and then from there on, you're not fixing that problem again. But if you just keep doing it, then you're constantly be dragged into the weeds, and you can't do that as a leader.
Wow, Wow, that's awesome. Work with, don't do for. That's 5 awesome words. Thank you so much. So, Rick, if somebody's listening today and they're like, man, this is really good stuff. I want to learn more about Apex. I want to talk to Rick. What's the best way for people to reach out to you and connect with you?
The website is apexgts.com. The email is rick@apexgts.com. So either way is great, and I would be happy to have a conversation with somebody and see if there's some synergy somewhere.
Awesome. And if you don't agree with the transform like I do, save your breath, because I tried, you guys. I tried to get him to change that, but he's not budging. So, hey, I appreciate everything that you're doing to transform and to grow and to succeed, help people succeed. I mean, I never would have thought about the highest level of an organization as an Apex, and I thank you for that new perspective. And, for people listening, definitely jump onto apexgts.com and learn more. There's a bunch of great stuff there. And, Rick's always there to help. And again, thanks for all that you've taught me over the years, and can't wait to keep learning more.
All right. Sounds good. I appreciate being on.